All right, guys, ACL injuries, topic this week, real important for you guys. I know we've been talking about this recently. We got an announcement specifically about a product we're coming out to help you with this. But just recently we were at a clinic and it came to our attention that a local high school had 18 ACL injuries in 1 year, and only one of them were from contact from another player. That means 17 of those were from improper mechanics, how they're jumping, how they're landing, making cuts poorly, not conditioned the right way to do this. So just because you have a strength coach doesn't mean their athletes are taken care of. You've got to ask questions. We're going to give you some of those questions to ask, find out what types of things you should be forward. So don't miss this episode. Make sure that you like it, subscribe it, and let's go with episode 38 of the SOA podcast.
Strength of America podcast.
All right, welcome back. The SOA podcast, episode 38. Bob Davis.
Bobby Davis.
Appreciate you guys being with us and sticking around. And again, yes, ACL, this is a big thing for me because of the number of injuries I had with knees growing up before we started Strength of America, found out about the programs. But the number of athletes out there, we've got over 250,000 athletes on average that are tearing ACLs every year. And Bobby and I presented just 2 weekends ago at the Arizona NSCA clinic here in Mesa. We were honored to be a part of that and asked to be out there to present this. And our main focus was a hands-on clinics. We had about 100 coaches that were there, and great energy from all of them putting that in. It was coaches, physical therapists, athletic trainers, personal trainers, students. It was a great group that were out. But a big part for us was let's raise awareness about this and do something. For far too long, we think that, well, injuries happen and, it's just a part of sport. And yes, injuries do happen, but also after 30 years of us being in this, it's still amazing to me that we have strength coaches now in almost all high schools out there, but the conditioning and what they're doing, they're not doing the right stuff, a lot of them. And that's where this awareness, and the NFCA is doing a lot to help with this, and a lot of organizations out there. But for us, we put this product specifically, and we're going to have a link down here for you at the end so you can get a hold of this. But our main thing is let's keep these athletes safe. And like I said, when I heard about this high school that had 18 ACLs in 1 year, that's just unheard of. That's just somebody's not doing their job taking care of these kids. So as a part of this, we wanted to really show how you even evaluate. How do you know potentially is this going to happen, or just freak things happen? So there are things you can do, and we put in this program specifically, how do you tell, is your athlete prone to ACL injuries? How they jump, how they move, where should they be squatting, what kind of strength work should they be doing for it? What about their agility and power and movement throughout that? So we have all phases of this, everything from your core strength that you need to have, your balance is a part of it, how you land, how you take off, what's happening with the knees and body positioning. So we take you step by step with this product. And we're getting great feedback so far from the coaches that we announced and kicked it off officially at the NSCA clinic here in Mesa, and now we're ready to release it. So we're doing that to you guys today. That's going to kick off. So we'll talk more about that as we go on. Bob, what are some of the things you saw, like from the clinic, and what happened?
I think before we touch on the clinic, just think about coaches as we talk about this and start to realize that you want to hope it's not a negligence thing, that it's not a coach that knows what he or she should be doing to take care of these injuries. Because more times than not, it's probably not a negligent thing. Sometimes you get a bad apple and they're just not worried about that. They're just thinking performance. How can I build this bigger, stronger, faster engine? But we have to also realize we got to make sure that we're maintaining, we're taking care of those break, shocks, and struts as well. So just realize, don't go attack coaches, but just say, hey, maybe they just need to be educated on some of this stuff. Maybe on one side of the spectrum, they're good at getting them strong, powerful, and fast, but if we're not taking care of the other end of the spectrum and creating a whole approach here, now we're creating more explosive athletes that don't have very good brakes. And think on a car. If I got a really fast car and it doesn't have any brakes, guess what? How's it going to stop? Crashing into something to stop it. So just keep that in mind. We're just looking to educate and bring more information to more people, to ask more questions. Am I doing enough? What's best for these kids?
I think that's part, a good point about that too, is, Because no matter what we've done, I mean, we've seen a lot of things in the 30 years that I've been part of it, well, 35 and counting my time at Nebraska. And the programs change, we keep going. And yes, that's what the NSCA and so many other products are out there to really help educate and keep our coaches going. But what we don't want to do, we make sure you as parents know, what should you be asking? What's going on in the school? And yes, there's certain certifications that can make a difference, but we've also seen some people that have these certifications that still don't know the basics on this specific thing. That again, it has to be important to them to do it. And like we talked about with our Olympic lifting last week, don't coach it if you don't know it. But a primary thing for me as a strength and conditioning coach is getting that athlete prepared for the sport. Conditioning for the sport, being able to wrestle and play football and all that, and cardiovascular conditioning and strength, that's a pretty easy part. That can be done pretty easily. But being able to handle the stress of the sport and continually get stronger, better, and faster throughout the season so you peak when you need to, and that you can handle it and you're not ripping up joints, that's what a true strength and conditioning coach on our part has really been about. You've got to take a look at the big picture. That's how you eat, how you sleep, recovery, mobility, all of that has to be a component of it. And again, as a parent, it's hard to know what to ask if you don't know what's happening. We just assume it's handled. But a lot of times I can tell you these jobs go out there sometimes just because they know somebody. And that's fine. We've used those connections, and somebody's got a job or helped me, a former athlete that's been with me, and asked for those references. That's important to do. You've got to build those relationships. But just because they have the job doesn't mean they're taking care of the big picture. So ask, what kind of things are they doing? How often do they train? And what's the history and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish? And what do you do about injuries? How many injuries do you have? Does your strength coach work with the athletic trainer at the school so that they can keep adjusting for things? Because things happen. You get freshmen coming into that high school that are just starting with you. Most of them don't know anything that they've done in the past about the weight room or conditioning or injuries. Hopefully they're actually doing those physicals and getting the information with the athletic trainer. The athletic trainer is then putting them in contact with the strength coach. They're working together to find out what kind of problems are out there and what they need to do to adjust. Because otherwise, some of these schools are out there. I know when there for a while was at Red Mountain, we had sometimes 70 to 80 guys in a weight room at one time. That's a lot of people to take care of for one strength coach. So it's not an easy job, and we don't mean make light on it and just hammer on somebody. But at the same time, these kind of injuries, they happen periodically. But to have that many of them in a short time, we've got to refocus it. So that's when we really started to put a lot of effort into what we're doing with this product to get it out to you. So that's a big part for us is, just got to educate them. So just asking the questions, how many of those kind of injuries you have? What about neck injuries? What about concussions? What are you doing for it? They're getting some great programs, and we're going to have an episode coming up soon on concussions because that's another important thing. And there's a lot of misnomers about it, and there's some real common concerns that we've got to do. So, but let's ask questions and find out, and that's one of them. What kind of things are going on? What do we do about it? What kind of injuries do you have?
Good. All right, so should we go on a couple of those questions we got?
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. What was, one of them I had, for example, was Andy, rugby coach, was at the clinic, and was asking specifically, on the drills that we do, should we have our athletes do these ACL drills, our agility drills and movement and body control with cleats or tennis shoes? So what do we normally tell them with that?
More often than not, we start just shoes, whether it's grass or whatnot. The age-old thing we'll hear from our athletes and other people, especially with poor mechanics when they come in, is going through agility drills. They say, "Oh, it's slick. I need my cleats. It's just my shoes and this and that." And unless it's like puddled on the ground. Okay, if it's a dry field, stuff like that, you should be able to have an athlete go through at a tempo to where they can go through change of direction drills. As long as they're placing their foot underneath their hips, getting in the right positions, they're not getting extended and swaying, different aspects like that. If they're producing proper mechanics going through these drills, they will have traction. So we like to kind of put them through the process of that and then introduce cleats. If we just keep cleats in there, then they're just going to feel like they're just making great cuts all day. And, it's hard to make changes if they feel like they're moving great. So when you strip that away, they start to realize they're not really moving great, and then they put the cleats back on. Now they feel like they have a whole new system, and now that they just feel so much faster. So,
yeah, and that's a big thing. For what we tell them, too, is those kids that are moving great with the cleats, you put the tennis shoes on, you see right away who's making change of direction with a straight leg. They're out wide because those cleats grab and they'll help give them that push. Yeah. They do it with tennis shoes. That's why when we played with Converse and stuff and ran around, We didn't tear ACLs. What happened if we did poor mechanics when we were running? We slid and fell down. Big deal. We got back up and went. These kids are changing with straight legs, grabbing on, exploding, and poor mechanics. They're ripping the ACL. So these kids learn how our basic function, which you'll learn in the drills that we go through on the ACL, is we've got to drop our hips. And those kids have been with us and coaches, they hear it all the time. We drop the hips as they're down, they plant as if they're digging a hole. Put the shovel down, they plant, dig straight down. They don't dig out straight, they plant. Well, as they drop, that gives us traction on any surface. You bet mud, ice, okay, excluded, but we're in Arizona, so we don't have the ice. But the mud, that happens, again, cleats get things to help them with those. But the change of direction of planting and then exploding in the right body position, now they learn to move with those tennis shoes flat on grass surfaces. What happens when they grab the cleats and they're changing correctly? They've got a huge increase on their making cuts, change of direction, that first reaction that we're after is so important. So get that into it, but then after a while, sometimes they'll get complacent. So that's why when our kids do our summer conditioning, if we're out on grass, I've got them every day bringing cleats, tennis shoes. And I'll say, okay, pull out the tennis shoes. We'll do that. If I'm seeing some things starting to reoccur, that they're slipping into some poor mechanics with the cleats again, we put the tennis shoes and right away they start figuring it out. That's like, those of you guys have ever used that Medicus golf club. You're out there and you're having trouble with the golf swing and you get that club that bends halfway if you're in poor mechanics. It gives you the feedback right away. You can get right back in the groove. So things like that make a big difference on just figuring out how to move. So yes, start with the tennis shoes, bring the cleats back into it, but periodically throw the tennis shoes back on to help them keep on track.
That's like Lee Taff used to say, and if you guys go back to that podcast and look it over, he likes to have athletes go through the drills for assessments, kind of like my dad was just talking about, and then as they're going through the drills, let's say they have the cleats back on, they're going through changes, different things like that, maybe they're making straight leg changes, so now our corrective is going to be, just like Lee said, go through the drills, and then we'll pull back, we'll do a corrective, and then we'll go back to the drill again. So that concept works great, because if you start to see, just like he was talking about, athletes trying to change straight-legged, I tell my kids, if they do that with their legs straight out to the side, they have no spring to create power from, legs not bent, and also right there you're having a lot more opportunity for that leg to slide and slip. Now, if that leg's underneath you, now you have a lot more traction. So now if we take that off, okay, now we start moving better again with the shoes. Okay, now we re-implement the cleats back from there. So just kind of use that on a corrective basis. What was your other one? What was your other question?
I had several that asked this question, but I just pulled Mike's out, football coach. He was asking, this ACL program, when do you put it in? How do you put that into practices? Do they do that at the end of the practice or how they're doing? Well, the whole idea of this ACL prevention program, once you've done the testing and evaluating and see where they're at, all of the drills we do, you can implement. If you do 4-corner drills, you do sprint backpedal drills, you do anything out there, the whole idea is rather than adding another 30 minutes of training for ACL work, anytime you work on cuts, change direction, power movements, snaps, it's incorporated. You keep these fundamentals into it, and that's what we're doing with the tennis shoes and the cleats. They learn that every time I'm doing a sprint and then to a point and go into a vertical jump, right then I'm practicing at that point. If I'm doing 4-corner drills, every corner I'm planting, a leg hits. As soon as it hits, I explode, push in the right direction, and you're centered in the body. If they're doing it with straight legs, they're sliding. So incorporating these in your normal stuff you already do, you're not doing anything different. We're not adding more. We're just making sure that they're effective every corner. And not only now we're protecting the knees because we're moving correctly, you're going to increase your speed and power. That reaction, when you make contact and I hit and I explode and take the guy out next to me, that really picks that up and really produces power going. So we got to make sure that we're set, and hopefully he won't take me out on this one. On next one.
So as we go through on that, I just think realize, some of you may not all be strength coaches. So if you're not already technically doing this stuff, let's say you're a sports coach. If I'm going through, I'm a sports coach and I'm not working on these, then a good place to start is just like when you get the program, you'll see we laid out a system of a warm-up, okay? And you can start to plug and play in the warm-up section some of these different drills, so you can start to add in, and then you can just go from a small dose, working daily over time, and then you can start to incorporate little things even more. Or maybe you do dedicate 30 minutes to some movement stuff in your practice. You might say, well, we need to get more time on the ball, doing different things like that. And I completely understand that. But we got to keep in mind also that if we're after trying to reduce the risk of injuries and we're trying to increase their performance or make them quicker, if you have a better athlete coming to you, then when you start your sport-related skill stuff, it's going to be a lot more easier for you. You're not going to have to teach little Johnny about these little side pieces with body awareness, or maybe they're just moving really slow and you don't really quite know why, and you have a bunch of athletes. Now you don't have to really worry at that moment about taking little Johnny over there to work on this while the other kids are doing this. Just have all the kids work on some of the stuff at the beginning, because everybody's going to benefit from it, and then creep into your practice there. So
and all these things
start small and then build out from there.
Yeah, and they all work as warm-ups. I mean, these basic things you could put in. We talk about, the baseball team or the other ones that are running to the pole and back or doing those other things. Instead of wasting 5 or 6 minutes doing just running laps, which isn't a great warm-up anyway, let's work on some explosive movements, landing, mechanics, where they're at and going into it. That parent that just wants that little extra, that's where these things are easy to go through these drills and put into it. But you soccer coaches, tennis, football, basketball, volleyball, you all work things where sprint to the next and react, sprint to this point and backpedal, pivot, go across. We pivot. Our tennis player taking that step, you take a couple of steps, you explode and push into it. They've got to use their feet, hips, explode. They drop, get that position, and explode through it. Soccer, the same thing. Football, any of these sports, you're already doing it. Now teach them when they make that play and that pattern that they're moving across, they do it with speed and power. You've got that opening to cut, you drop at that point. We don't have to run and let our feet cross. That's what our lazy leg, you'll see part of that coming into it. We hit that outside leg, we've got the hips already dropped as soon as you make contact. As soon as you feel that ground, we explode and push into that hole so you get there fast. So it's in the normal stuff you do already. It doesn't have to be a conditioning workout to implement these. If you're doing them, that's great. Let's just make sure they're done right. But any play, any pattern that you're running out there on the field or the court, implement these things as part of it. That's where we make a big difference in it.
Yeah.
So I think those are the big things that we got out of it. There were several other things going on to it, but those are the meat and potatoes for you. Is it understanding, the progression in what you're doing? And when they start getting better, it doesn't mean, okay, they're good, they figured it out. Because what happens to these kids? They go through those growth spurts and things are happening. I'll see him sometimes only in the summer, and last year he's moving great, he comes back in, but now he's 4 inches taller and moving like a puppy dog, trying to figure out how to move their feet again. Yes, maybe even a giraffe. So figuring all these things and keeping them in, that's why the parents, a small thing to get into it and implement and take them through drills. Man, you can get a lot done in a 10, 15-minute workout with some of these too. So, just want to make sure you guys have this. So as part of it as well, you guys are the first release for it. So we'll have the link down below. You can get set up for it, get signed up for it, and get the program. And then anytime you have questions, let us know. And we'll be adding things to it because there's more we wanted to add to the product, but we've already got a lot of stuff. The idea wasn't to overwhelm you, but we'll put different drills, but it's the same mechanic every time you change direction. Drop the hips to get traction. As soon as you do, we explode. But the hips, the eyes, everything needs to be in the right position so you get the most out of that drill as well. Because we don't want to just work on, preventing the knees, but I want to produce powerful, fast athlete at the same time and keep them safe. Good? All right, cool. So, all right, guys, thanks a lot. Appreciate you following. You got an athlete, a coach, a parent involved in athletics, please forward this on to them. And if on this, make sure you subscribe to the page, like it, get it across, tagging, but hit the bell also for notification. That way when we put a video, we've got some other things we're going to put into this, you'll find it and come ahead to it. Not just a weekly podcast show, but the other individual tips that we put out in between the shows too. So let us know what we can do to help. But Facebook, let it out. Want to help cut these injuries down. So if we can get these coaches to implement this in, and parents in between, because you can't always rely on the other end of it, man, I just want these kids safe. And that was our whole product, making sure these kids figure out, we want them healthy with the knees, we want them to play longer. But let's build some powerful, fast athletes, but let's keep them safe. I just hate hearing about somebody that blew out a knee, an ACL, a 14 or 15-year-old kid, and it really could have been avoided. And especially when I said 70% of those, 250,000, are non-impact from another athlete. So they landed incorrectly, did something wrong, or weren't conditioned to handle it. We need to do more about that. So we want to keep doing it, and you're helping us. Really appreciate it a lot. So thanks again, and we're going to see you guys next week.
All right.
All right, thanks a lot.
See ya.